decide which type of sensors which we can use in order to make a good system to survive or to monitor the health of the persons. After that, or after collecting data, we have to look for the good solution. I think the majority of you are financial or economics specialists. For you, for example, the majority of systems which you can, or the majority can activate the microphone. In the Google Meet. Okay. C'est bien. So for you, for example, for trading, we take example of trading. For the trading problem, we can use, for example, 3 or 4 type of algorithms. The first is using, for example, the prediction using regression models or using reinforcement learning in order to predict the signal, for example, S&P or XPX or Nasdaq or gold signal. Or you can, for example, use a statistics model like ARIMA or SARIMA or etc. etc. Or you can use the recurrent neural network in order to predict the signal for example, for S&P or XPX or Nasdaq signal. In healthcare, it's the same thing. We have to define which model we have to use in order to make or to develop a good systems. For example, if we use signals collected from sensors, we have to look for the good model in order to make a good systems. For example, if we have signals, we have to look for example, recurrent neural network. We have to look for example, some convolutional network using one dimension, etc., etc., etc. After choosing the best model or the best algorithms which we can use, we have to look for the good evaluation protocol. For example, coupled protocol evaluation or leave one out protocol evaluation in order to validate our model. After the tuning of our model, we have to calibrate. Of course, if we arrive to find a good results, we have to calibrate our model in order to generalize our model for any patients or any signal. We have after that to make the prediction, and we have to generalize our model for any patients or any type of signals. So now we will talk about some sensors that we can use for healthcare services or medicine services. For example, we can use a smartwatch which aim to collect data. For example, beating heart, we can use this signals as data to make a diagnostic for a patient. We can also make, for example, electrocardiogram sensors which aim to collect signals from the body of the person in order to make a diagnostic for the person. For example, we can use heart monitor is a bad sensor. By the way, why is a bad sensor? Because we can't put this sensor all the time. We can't sleep with this sensor. More than that, the monitor time or average monitor time of this sensor, so using this sensor, is between 24 and 48 hours. We can use, for example, another sensor which baptized Geopatch is a good sensor, by the way, because we can monitor or during of monitoring the person using this sensors up to 2 weeks. Now, what is the challenge, or what is the problem of collecting data in healthcare services? We have to pay attention about data. For example, if we want to use lead, we have to use a lot of lead. One lead, it's not able to collect the good data in order to make a good solution or a good system for healthcare services. For example, we have to use more than 12 leads put on the body of the person in order to collect data from the body of the person and in order to make a good diagnostic of the person. The second challenge is the type of signal. We suppose that we have a signal. We have to use a good window to splice the signal in order to classify this segment of signals and in order to make a good diagnostics. So the challenge is how we can or how we have what we have to do to choose the best window. So what we did in the past, or what is the solution in the past? There are two solutions. The first solution using future imaging, like dynamic warping time, like traditional algorithms, which aim to align or which aim to, for example, splice the signal in order to make the signal as a set of segments of signals. The second method is using the pre-processing methods, which aim, for example, to apply a filter or using a band pass filter, using a threshold. And it's a big problem using a threshold. It's not the good solution. Why? Because we have to define the good threshold in order to make a good solution or a mixed system, a good system in healthcare services. Why? Because it's about the life of a person. It's a critical problem, and we have to choose the good and the good threshold. We can also use, for example, suppose that we have a signal and we have to sampling or to sample the signal. We can, for example, apply a peak direct function in order to just using peak of the signal as a data, or in order to sample the signal as a vector. We can also use air-to-air interval, and we can use a lot of methods that we can use or we can apply in order to collect data from signals. So suppose that we arrive to collect a signal from sensor. We will use, for example, electrocardiogram signal. We have to use this electrocardiogram signal, and we have to splice this signal as a segment, a set of segments, and we have to give a good label for this segment in order to make a classification or a supervised model, or in order to make a good solution or a good algorithm to classify those segments of signals. One of the architecture that we can find in stage of arts is ResNet, or residual network non-network, which is used with one dimension. Why one dimension? Because we have a signal and we have a vector. In this case, we have to use a convolutional network with one dimension, not with two or with three or something like that. For example, in this solution, they use the residual non-network, but they found that with 34 layers, and they found that it's not the good solution. Why? Because if, for example, the developing a deep non-network, does not mean it's a good non-network. Generally, there are 3 or 4 methods that we can use or we can apply in order to form a good system or a good non-network. The first one is using manual methods that we, for example, we will use, for example, or we use, for example, combine between parameters manually, and we will test those combinations in order to find a good solution. For example, second method that we can use, for example, in order to find a good network, we can, for example, use the grid method. And for the grid method, there are two methods. For example, we can use a grid method. We will put a grid and we will test all combinations between hyperparameters in order to find a good solution. Or we will just use a random combination in order to accelerate the time of processing of this method, because these methods take a lot of time and a big duration to train our model. The last method is using Bayes algorithms or Bayes probability or Bayes Bayes in order to find good hyperparameters for our method, for our model. So the concept of residual neural network is used in a blocks, but is the residual units, which and in this blocks we will use or take the output of the first layers as our input of the last layers in order to overcome the problem of exploding gradient and vanishing the gradient. What is the mean of vanishing gradient? Means that we lose the information collected from the first layers. In order to overcome this problem, we will use the output of these layers as an input of the last layers. For the exploding gradient, the problem of the exploding gradient is when we have, for example, a maximum about, for example, errors, and when we calculate the gradient of these errors, we found that we arrive to, for example, a good errors for us, but stable model, and in reality, it's not correct. So for residual block, we have an extension about this residual block, which we use the output of the first layers and we apply some layers or some operation like convolution operation, batch normalization operation, Relu operation, in order to have more and more information about this data collected from the first layers. And we will take this output of this branch as an input for the last layers in order, of course, to overcome the problem of exploding and vanishing gradient. The last extending of residual neural network model is wide ResNets, which we apply dropout. Dropout is a regularization solution which aim to use a probability of killing neural in layers for regularization is a solution to overcome the problem of overfitting. So now we will talk about collecting data. For example, there are a lot of data available in the web. If you for example, if you decide to make a solution for medical systems, for example, there are data which collected using electrocardiogram sensors. This data is collected from or about 64,121 age cardiogram electrocardiogram records. It's about 32,000 minutes. It's about 29,163 patients. There are this data is collected using or labeled using the knowledge of the community of cardiologists to determine the ground truth of the census. So to evaluate or to label to give the labels of this data, they, for example, use the knowledge of cardiologists or the specialists in the domain, and they collect a lot of information from these cardiologists in order to have a good solution or have a good label for their data. This figure illustrates the ROC curve using specificity and sensitivity collected or calculated after, of course, training their model. It's the cumulate data or the cumulate specificity or the representation of the cumulate specificity and sensitivity for the testing data. The graph in the blue is the value that they found using residual non-network. The value in red is value given by specialists or by cardiologists. So this table illustrates the results that they found by computing specificity and average cardiologist sensitivity and applying a deep non-network algorithm sensitivity. By the way, for the healthcare systems, we have to have a good sensitivity in order to apply these systems in real life or to generalize the system. Why the sensitivity? Because the sensitivity, it's give us how our algorithm is able to detect, for example, the skills of the person or to make a good diagnostic of the persons, of the patients. So for improve or reduce medical errors, for example, in 1919 reports in United States, they found that between 44,000 and 98 people die in the United States because of a misreading of X-ray images. It's a problem about phenomena problem or phenomena scales. So there are solutions that are developed instead of arts in order to overcome this problem or in order to improve the misreading of X-ray images. It's about deep learning for chest radiograph diagnostics. It's an algorithm which aims to use X-ray images, and we will use, for example, this image is about X-ray images, and if you look, for example, the region surrounded by the red color or the red line is the region which give us information about the label of this image. For example, we can use a lot of solution or a lot of non-network in order to detect those persons or to make a diagnostic for those persons. For example, we can use autoencoder model. We can use, for example, we can use DanceNet. It's a solution published in 2016. It's about, and DanceNet is just a sequence of convolution non-network. We can use, for example, class activate in which content block of convolution batch normalization and ReLU, and after that we apply a global average pooling in order to, for example, reduce the dimension of or the size of images and concentrate the information in images. And after that, we have to, for example, apply a flatten operation. After that, we will use, for example, layer or dense activity layers in order to classify those images. There are another solution which aim to, for example, detect cheese using MRNet. It's a solution. It's content 3 or a lot of branch with each branch is about an AlexNet non-network, and we will concatenate the results of each branch or have just one sensor like the output of our model. We can also, for example, this is a real solution, or it's a solution which we can, for example, install in our phone. It's X-ray for all, which give us diagnostics about X-ray images. And we can also use autoencoder solution, for example, Unit or Unix Plus. The concept of autoencoder is using 3 types of branch. The first branch, in the first branch, for example, we will use or will apply 3 types of operation. First, it's convolution, ReLU, batch normalization, and the pooling in order to reduce the dimension or the size of images. After that, we use a block baptized bottleneck block, which contains just a sequence or a sequence of convolution layers. After that, we will use the third branch in order to have an image with the same size of the input images. We will apply an operation baptized upsampling in order to increase the size of the output images or the result images after applying, of course, the pooling, and after applying the pooling block, after applying the bottleneck block. So thank you for your attention, and I'm open for your question or your comments. Oui. Oui. En fait, pour l'erreur, je viens de dire qu'ils sont basés, par exemple, labellisation sur l'expertise des spécialistes de domaine. Okay. Pourquoi? Parce que tout simplement, c'est très difficile de faire le diagnostic. Et c'est très difficile de faire le diagnostic. Donc, on va faire, par exemple, ou bien on va donner ces données-là à une large communauté des experts et on va collecter ces labels-là pour qu'on arrive tout simplement à faire, c'est pas un bon modèle, mais c'est presque une bonne labellisation. De passer de quoi? Ah oui, donc pour les images, pour les X-ray, par exemple, pour X-ray images. Alors pour ah oui. Bon, c'est ça en fait l'utilité des réseaux de neurones convolutionnels. Ça veut dire quoi? Ça veut dire que je vais, par exemple, prendre une image et avant de prendre cette image-là, il faut que je donne ces images-là à des experts afin de faire une très bonne labellisation. Ok? Pourquoi? Parce que le grand problème, bien le problème majeur en service médical ou bien en service sanitaire, c'est la sensibilité. Si on n'arrive pas à bien labelliser les images, donc on n'arrive pas à faire un bon modèle. Donc il faut qu'on donne ces données-là à une large communauté et après on va collecter, par exemple, ou bien on va prendre cette labellisation comme des labels pour les images et après qu'est-ce qu'on va faire? On va, par exemple, pour labellisation là, c'est pas toujours on va utiliser par exemple des étiquettes. Je peux par exemple utiliser un masque. Par exemple, je vais utiliser un masque. Ça veut dire quoi un masque? Ça veut dire que j'ai l'image qui représente par exemple l'état d'un patient. Et le masque, ça veut dire est-ce que la personne, par exemple, est infectée par un cancer ou pas. Ça veut dire que je vais prendre que la partie, je vais prendre une image en noir et que la partie qui représente, par exemple, le cancer, qui sera en blanc. Et là, par exemple, j'ai l'information, j'ai la position où le cancer est positionné dans l'image. Et je vais prendre ces deux matrices comme des entrées pour que j'arrive à, tout simplement, à localiser la partie qui concerne le cancer. Oui.
Un nombre très précis d'expériences pour faire un diagnostic informatique et pour évaluer une pathologie ou les situations. Donc, vous, avec votre analyse, vous pouvez juste analyser un nombre très précis de scènes ou de patients. Tandis que lorsqu'on va faire cette biologie,
Ça veut dire un peu d'erreur d'après l'application de votre modèle, par exemple? Oui. Oui. Oui, 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 bien sûr. Oui, bien sûr. Oui, 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 bien sûr. Pour minimiser ce taux d'erreur-là, je vais baser la labellisation ou bien ma labellisation sur une large communauté des experts. Oui, oui. C'est la même chose. C'est la même chose. Ah oui, oui, j'arrive à comprendre. Ça veut dire que vous n'êtes pas obligé, par exemple, de faire ou bien de donner les données à une large communauté ou bien de faire collecter les données, par exemple, en utilisant un chiffre très important des patients. C'est ça. Ça veut dire que vous pouvez, par exemple, juste utiliser les données collectées d'après, par exemple, 15 patients et vous allez, par exemple, généraliser ou bien, bon, je pense que vous pouvez, par exemple, utiliser juste une méthode qui vous permet de générer les exemples et comme ça, vous faites data augmentation. C'est ce que vous voulez dire? Oui, oui, oui. Oui, 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 oui. Hein? Oui, oui, j'ai compris votre question. Non. Oui, j'ai compris votre question. Ça veut dire le nombre des, par exemple, des sources sur lesquelles vous basez votre collection de données. C'est ça. Oui, bon, en général, pour le deep learning, tant que votre data est très grande et représente un très grand nombre des patients, ça sera bon. Ce sera bien pour votre modèle. OK. Par exemple, pour les images, tant, en général, pour les healthcare services ou bien pour les diagnostics, etc., bien, vous n'êtes pas obligé d'avoir une base de données, qui contient des millions d'images, mais vous devez avoir quand même une base de données qui contient des milliers d'images, par exemple, 5 000 images, 10 000 images. Sinon, vous n'aurez pas un bon modèle. Moi, par exemple, j'ai développé des modèles pour la détection des cancers en se basant sur les X-ray images, par exemple. Et je trouve que je suis obligé d'avoir une base de données avec un chiffre très important des images. Sinon, je n'arrive pas à avoir un modèle parfait. Pas parfait, il n'y a pas des modèles parfaits en machine learning et en deep learning en général, mais un modèle très performant. C'est clair. Ça veut dire que tant que notre data est très grande et volumineuse, ça sera bien pour mon modèle. La question qui se pose là, est-ce que juste vous avez le hardware pour une très grande data ou bien une data très volumineuse? Des images, par exemple. Oui. Oui, oui. Oui, oui. Des patients. Oui, j'ai compris j'ai bien compris votre question. Ça veut dire que je peux avoir que, par exemple, 15 patients, et à partir de ces 15 patients, je peux collecter les données. C'est ça votre question. Les caractéristiques. En fait, la collection de données, ça veut dire la collection des caractéristiques. Parce que tout simplement, d'après les images, je peux avoir les caractéristiques qui concernent en fait, ces images-là. Okay. Mais en général, pour un modèle de deep learning, tant que votre base de données est très volumineuse, c'est bien pour vous. Pourquoi? Parce que tout simplement, vous allez éviter le problème des occlusions. OK? 1, 2, vous avez une base de données qui sera un petit peu générale. OK? 2, 3, le problème, ou bien le grand majeur de services sanitaires, c'est que on n'arrive pas à avoir des très bons diagnostics en réalité par les médecins. C'est normal. OK? Donc, est-ce qu'on peut, par exemple, développer un modèle qui essaiera de faire ça? Oui, pourquoi? Parce que tout simplement, d'après la collection, ou bien la généralisation, ou bien la collection des données, d'après, par exemple, des sources diverses, et à partir, ou bien la labellisation à partir d'un ensemble, ou bien d'une communauté très large des spécialistes, on peut avoir, par exemple, une base de données qui généralise un petit peu tous les cas. On ne peut pas avoir une base de données qui généralise tous les cas, mais quand même qui généralise le maximum. C'est bien. C'est pour les images. Okay. Est-ce que c'est clair? Vous avez des questions? Ok.